Hi, folks. Welcome today to my podcast, Unifour Life Retirement, here with Dr. J. I'm Dr. J here in the Unifour area of Hickory, North Carolina. I've got two very special guests with me this morning. Elechia Morgan, she's the owner of Muscle RX in Hickory.
Yes.
And Darnell Morgan, the owner of Resilient Movement and Performance. So we've got two good entrepreneurs right here, the local, and they've got a special. They want to introduce their business, about what they do, how they can help the area, and then we'll go into a very special story that Darnell has. So Elechia, Muscle RX, tell us a little bit about it.
We have been in the Hickory area since 2009, serving over 10,000 people with over a 93% success rate with acute and chronic pain. We perform what is called corrective manual and stabilization therapy, where we can rewrite muscle memory patterns, everything from like pain to performance to bad habits.
So you help people get rid of the pain,
Yes.
ease the pain, right? So
Yeah, we have that, and we also have kids who want to get stronger and bigger and faster, and we can help on that aspect too.
So you help them out as they're younger, into their middle school, high school, and even college years.
And professionals.
Professionals, so great. I mean, that's outstanding.
Yep.
Hickory never had something like that years ago. So
Yeah.
that's good. That's good. Something new. That's great. And you've been doing. I've seen you on Facebook. It's on social media. Muscle RX. It's a great business. So please look up Elechia and visit her. Have any kind of questions? I'm sure she'd be great to answer emails or questions at all. So
Anything you need.
thank you for that. Darnell, Resilient Movement and Performance. Tell us about that business, sir.
Resilient Movement and Performance. I kind of piggyback off what she does. I'm a personal trainer in the area, and I work with adults and athletes who are dealing with pain, injury, coming off of an injury, surgery, and just looking to get back to their old self and be able to do the things that they're used to doing.
That's good. So people, when they're in pain, they come and see you. And with a 93+%, I mean, that's really good.
Yeah.
That's when they leave, they feel better. So wonderful. So good. It's outstanding. Glad to have you folks here today, and glad to have your businesses here at Hickory as well. So thank you for that. So Darnell, you've got a good story for us, and I think there was something you had go on back in February, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. And I was going to have you and Elechia share a little bit about that story, kind of let our viewers hear about what happened, and we'll go from there.
Okay, absolutely. Start with I had pulmonary embolism, which is a blood clot in my lungs. Something I thought I'd never have, but here we are dealing with it now. The way it started, I had a coach's retreat. I coach football, so we had a retreat that we were going to out in Arkansas. And a couple of weeks before we were supposed to go out, I knew we were flying on a plane, and somewhere I had heard or read that pulmonary embolisms can kind of move and stuff if you're in a plane, because like I said, 2 weeks before that, I was feeling some kind of pain and discomfort in my leg. And I remember years ago when I had a knee surgery, that same kind of feeling happened, and I had my first blood clot back then. That was probably 2015, I believe. So it was some of that same feeling. So I was like, well, let me just get checked out now just to be sure, because I don't want to hop on a plane if I'm dealing with this. So we go to the emergency room and we get checked out, and they don't find anything. So I'm like, I'm good, I'm clear. So I go ahead on the trip, and probably a day or day and a half into the trip, I started feeling like that same discomfort in my leg. But in the back of my head, I'm like, well, they said I don't have a blood clot, so I'm just going to ignore it and just roll. And I dealt with that. The pain kind of increased as the days went by, but I just chalked it up to maybe it was a long plane ride and dealing with something from that. Then we got back home probably, I think we were out there 4 days, I believe, and I just felt sick, like just really drained and run down. And I was thinking that maybe it was jet lag. I never experienced jet lag because I only flew. This is my second time flying. So I kind of reached out to some of the coaches and said, have you guys experienced any of this? Is anybody feeling bad? And there was maybe one other guy that felt similar to how I felt. So I believe I told her, she was away at the time, what was going on, and I took some meds, and I said I'll just relax and it'll probably go away. So then that night, when I laid down, I had to be up early for church in the morning for setup, and I started getting this pain like in my upper back, and it kind of kept me from sleeping, so I was tossing and turning most of the night. And I got up the next morning, and the same symptoms started. Pain in my back. I was starting to get some chest pains and just feeling kind of drained, and ran down. And I took more meds that day and just figured I'd give it another day or so, and I told her about what was going on. And then she was like, if you're still feeling this way, either a day or two from now, then we're going to the hospital. So a couple of days passed by, and I'm still feeling that same type of stuff. So we're kind of going back and forth trying to figure out what it could be. Of course, I'm Googling and looking up stuff on the internet. And we gathered that it may be related to a gallbladder. I believe it was.
Well, yeah, it was. So, timeline. He got back that Saturday. I was on a work retreat as well, and I was coming back on Sunday. In fact, we actually met at church that Sunday, and we were coming home. It was Monday that we actually went to the doctor because he came back that Saturday morning. And so like all day Saturday I wasn't there, and I was just like, okay, what's the easiest medication to give him, which would be like either Tylenol or like Motrin, and to me, I tend to lean more toward like the ibuprofen just in case something was like happening that was like clot related, something to that extent or whatever. I was thinking more like platelet, like, right. And so whenever he did try Tylenol first, because that's all we had in the house. So he tried Tylenol first and it didn't touch anything. And then I noticed even at church, like he had to get up and walk out of church, which is unlike him. And whenever he left, like we hadn't really talked as far as like, he just said he was feeling bad, just like a guy, and like, right. not really like tell everything right. that was really going on. And so whenever he got up and walked out, and I was just like, like maybe it's digestive, maybe 7, like issues or whatever. And then whenever we got home, he was just like, it's hard to like really even take like a full breath. It's, like there's pain. And what he thought was like upper back, like whenever he really pinpointed it, it was actually like more on like the outside of his rib cage. And, and it was just like radiating up and down, and, like doing what I do, I was like, okay, well, maybe he pulled a muscle or he did something like that. And as soon as I started like palpating and like feeling on him, I even like put him on our bed, and I was like, turn this way and turn that way, like testing him and stuff as best I could without any, right. stuff. He like nothing was touching the pain. I was like, this is not muscular by any way, shape, or form. And so that's whenever, I was, Googling, he was Googling, I reached out to some of, colleagues and stuff, and, having a medical background, it was hard because, as much as you want to help, this is one reason they say, like, don't ever treat your family. Right. Because like you kind of get like swooped up into their emotions too, and so, I was reaching out to some colleagues for some unbiased opinions, and one of them was just like, yeah, it does sound like gallbladder. I can go ahead and call in a script for that. Something stopped us from actually going and getting that script. Like something happened during the day to where we couldn't make it in time. And so I was like, okay, I'll go and get it tomorrow. But lo and behold, I had reached out to another colleague that didn't really text me back at the same time the other one did. And he texted me like 10 o'clock that night and was just like, hey, like this sounds pretty serious. Can I call you? And so got on the phone with him, and we got to talking. He was like, get him to my office like as soon as possible. I was like, okay. So, if it was gallbladder, it could rupture, but he wanted to rule some other things that was out. I
never wanted it to be a gallbladder so bad. because I knew the alternative was not
Yes.
very good.
You was pulling for the gallbladder.
Yeah, so we were pulling for the gallbladder. We were like, oh, this is, it's in spasm. But the one thing that kept us is like, just FYI for anybody out there that's dealing with possible gallbladder issues. It only happens for like 30 minutes to an hour after you eat. So like, yeah, so you don't have issues like, that linger unless it's already like ruptured or something to that extent. So, he ended up sleeping on the couch. I slept on the other couch because I wasn't leaving his side at this point. I was just like, okay, we're going to make it through the night and, get him there. And again, just thinking it was something simple, but, it's an easy surgery, like if it is, like, this is really easy, like it's fine, like, so we went to Dr. DeSantis. I'm going to give him a plug because he is hands down probably one of my favorite doctors out there.
It's my favorite too now.
Yeah.
For Dr. DeSantis.
Yeah, Dr.
Shout out
DeSantis.
Dr. DeSantis.
So Dr. DeSantis met us at his office, honestly, like right before it was opening. And he was just like, hey, let's get you checked out. They did a chest x-ray. And they were like, okay, we see, inflammation in the area. I see x-rays day in and day out, of course, looking at like bones and, other things that are out of place, not necessarily looking at structures like lungs, inflammation, things like that. So he was just like, yeah, okay, I'm going to run one more test. And I was like, all right. So he went and done a blood test, and it was called a D-dimer test that like tests the proteins in the blood. And they told us, they were like, okay, so a bad score is like, 500, at worst 700. And it said it'll come back in about an hour, just hang around Hickory and we'll bring you back. It could be one of two things. We ruled out gallbladder. We think it's either pneumonia or potentially a blood clot. And so they were like, but before we even get you a CT, which is like thousands of dollars, let's at least do this test. And so we did the test, and we were over at Muscle RX.
Yeah, we were kind of, I think she was working or something. And,
Yeah.
and I was in my office waiting just for him to call. So I'm laying on one of my tables, and it seemed like it took forever. It was about maybe an hour. And I was just hoping that this would just be pneumonia, because I've heard about and read about pulmonary embolisms and, how fast they can literally kill you and take you up out of here. So I'm waiting on the call, and he finally calls, and I was standing up, just kind of pacing back and forth, waiting for him to get to the point, because he was talking about other stuff, and I wasn't really hearing that at the time.
He was
finally,
trying to prepare you for the blow.
I guess he was preparing me, and he was like talking about the D-dimer test, and he said normally an elevated number would be 600-700, and that mine was 14,000,
which
and
was
it's
28 times
the highest that he'd ever seen, and that I probably have a massive blood clot, and I needed to get to the emergency room immediately. And from that point, it's like your body just goes numb. I didn't really hear anything else he was saying. He was still talking, but I had kind of checked out after he told me that. And so I was just trying to go in the office to get Elechia, and she was in the middle of something, and I was like, you need to talk to the doctor. He's got to tell you what's going on. And I was waiting for her to come back, what seemed like the longest time ever.
All I was doing was closing my computer and getting up.
So I went back out there because in my mind she wasn't coming fast enough, and I was like, I need you to come talk to him now. And then I gave her the phone, and I just kind of sat on my bed or table in the office, and the doctor's talking to her, and facial expressions start to change. She's starting to get emotional. She's starting to cry, and I'm like, oh crap, this is real. That's when it really got real for me. because she's usually one that, you know, she takes the hard news like that, and she's pretty good about it. But when I saw what the news did to her, like I said, I just kind of shut down. Everything was numb. I couldn't really hear anything. The only thing I could think of, kind of like in the movies, you know, when like a bomb goes off and then that ringing sound is in your ear, but you can't really hear anything else. That's how it was for me. So we got in the car, and I'm just laying back looking up at the sky, and she's driving and crying, and she's calling my mom and telling that she needs to get here. And it was probably the longest ride I've ever took in my life, going to the hospital.
Yeah, it was, you know, coming, like I said, from a medical background, you hear a lot of things. You go through a lot of training, and, like, knowing what I know about the body, like, the news was not good. And in fact, actually, whenever we got there, like, we were expecting, you know, there was like this massive blood clot, and, you know, in the back of my head, I'm saying, okay, like, with technology today, they can go in, they can break it up, they can remove it, you know, like, surgically. That's something that is, you know, almost to where it takes the scare out of it, because there's, you know, evasive measures that they can do to, like, get it done quickly. And if it's a really massive blood clot, it's not moving. Like, you know, it's not going anywhere. It's just going to be there, and, you know, it's going to restrict blood flow and can create others. But it's, you know, to me, it was, you know, still emotional, but like I'm like going through, you know, my med textbooks at this point, like going through and like, okay, well, this is the good thing, you know, like, and I'm really big on trying to like highlight positives. Is like, we got this, we're going to get this done, you know, like, and I'm watching him, and as a wife, to watch him break, I rely on him. You know, I rely on his strength. He's the logical one. You know, he's the one that holds things together, and like usually when everything's going crazy in life, like he's the one that's just sitting here, like he's the steadfast. You know, he's the one that's immovable. And that was whenever I realized I had to be that for him. And so I had to clean myself up real quick. And I was like, okay, you know, God's got this, because he wouldn't have brought us here, you know, alone. So we were told that a triage nurse would be waiting for us at the ER to bypass anything and to get him straight onto a bed. And that didn't really work or pan out as well as we thought. There was a long line whenever we got there, and he's sitting there, and I'm just like, they literally said the triage nurse would be waiting for us. And of course she was, but she was like waiting in another room, like
to get processed and
everything. And you could see her start to peek out. But the lady that was taking everybody, like she kind of like was shooing me to the back or whatever, and I was just like, no, I'm not having this. I was just like, somebody's here waiting for us. So I kind of like almost like stormed. Right. I was like storming the forces at that point. And then we finally got him back. And they were taking like his blood pressure and everything, and I was getting antsy, and I was like, guys, like, I know that you have to do this, but I need you to like get him quickly to a bed. Like, he's not supposed to be moving that much more than what he is right now. And I was definitely not one of their favorite people that day. As soon as we got him to the bed, and I was like, okay, finally, you know, like we're here at the hospital, like they're going to confirm, you know, the blood clot, and then we'll hear measures. And I was just waiting for, you know, them to say, okay, he needs to go into surgery. We're going to, you know, break this up and get him admitted and all of this. And so they came in, they hooked him up, got IVs in him. I think, you know, that was probably for me the longest wait. Everything else was like pretty standard and like rush time, and I know like for him that was like the time that it was like slowest, like was getting the results. For me was having the ER doc come in there, and she was great. Like she really was. She was very like on it. The nurses were coming and checking on him like every 5 minutes. And so they finally rolled him back to CT, and whenever they came back out, at this point, the DeSantis, he was just like, Elechia, you may want to go ahead and start making arrangements to get your kids. And I was like, okay. So I heard that, but I didn't hear it. And then the doctor came back in. They rolled him back in. And then they were like, okay, this is it. They were like, you have 18 blood clots in your lungs.
Not one, but 18.
Again, never would have been so happy to see one blood clot in my life. 18 was a bit much.
18 had 10 in one lung and 8 in the other. And they told us that there was 0 surgical options to do anything because the clots were over the arteries that would feed to his brain and to his heart. So if they even tried to move one of those clots, dislodged it, whatever, it was going to be heart attack, stroke, or aneurysm. So they were like, at this point, we're going to have to wait and see. And like where they're located is probably one of the most dangerous areas. We're going to get started on heparin. But even that is like a waiting game to see if it will work in time because we're almost past the point of that. And so I walked out. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
I walked outside of his room to make the necessary phone calls and to tell his mom what was going on. And the doctor followed me out, and she was like, we don't know how long he has, but we're going to go ahead and make the arrangements to go ahead and admit him into the hospital because, like, we just don't know. Right now it's a waiting game. And at that point, I was like, I may actually lose my husband today.
And I never knew that part. I can't remember when she told me about the number of clots, but I didn't find this out till later on, weeks later.
The number of clots was actually told to you in the ER.
Like I said, mind you, in that state of mind, I was kind of checked out.
Yeah, because she was telling us, like, you know, I found out the same time he did about the 18 clots and the 10 in one and, you know, the 8 in the other and where they were located and the whole surgery thing. But you could just see him, like, I just remember him closing his eyes and squeezing my hand. And I was just like, no matter what.
It's a lot. Like, you know... We're obviously believers, and, you know, it's easy to talk about your faith and believing, but in that moment, in the moment of truth, when things really happen, it's a true test of your faith. And at that time, the only thing I could think of is, you know, he'll never leave me. Right now, me relying on myself, I know I'm not going to make it. So I had to lean on her. I had to lean on his word. But, I mean, I didn't know that the doctor even told her that as far as, like, I might not make it. I just decided in the room that, you know, I'm not done yet. I don't know how I'm going to get through this. I don't know if I even really believed it at that moment, but that's what I was telling myself the whole time. Yeah. And honestly, it's crazy how fate works. Like, had she told me that, I don't think I would have. I think I would have just, all right, well, I guess this is it. So I don't know why she didn't tell me for whatever reason. I mean, it was good because
I didn't believe it either.
I don't think, had I heard that piece of news, I probably would have lost it, broke. So,
and I already saw how broke he was, just in spirit of where, like, you know, we get to this age and you just, you know, you're still young. You don't think that stuff like this is going to happen. You know, we have 3 kids, you know, 18 and 13 and 12. And it's like, you know, they still have so much life ahead of them. And we're young parents. We get told that all the time about how young, you know, like we get told all the time that like you do not look old enough to have a college, you know, kid or whatever. And you hear that, you go through life, you know, hearing still how young you are, you know, like we're over here, you know, trying to make our dreams happen and everything. And for this, like, I mean, he literally was coming off of a coaching trip, you know, which is a dream of his. He literally went to another university to learn from them and go through stuff like that, and to come back and to feel the finale of things, you know, like just that, like things could be ending so quickly. And, you know, we've been together longer than we've been apart. You know, we're 20 plus in, and I couldn't imagine life without this one. And it was crazy because, you know, like 6 months prior, God really had me on my knees in November. Like it was crazy. Like he took me to dinner. He was like, we got to talk. He took me to dinner, and it was before all this ever happened. And he was just like, I don't know what wife I'm getting, you know, because of how many changes were being made. And little did I know that God was preparing me for that moment. And little did I know that, you know, I was going to have to truly like put my faith to the test. And, you know, it was hard that I could feel the human, you know, the doubts and all the things that came. And I looked at him literally as soon as I came in there, and I was like, I need to know where you are with Jesus. Like, I'm not joking. I like grabbed his hand and I looked him in the eye. I was like, I need to know where you are. And he was just like, I'm good. Like, it's a lot, but I'm good. And I was like, okay, well, as long as that is good, like we can fight from there. We can fight from there. And so we finally got admitted into the hospital, and you know, it again, the kids came right before he got admitted. I had a friend of mine who, oh, thank the Lord for great friends. She ended up like, she was in the middle of like preparing a closing, I think, and literally stopped everything she did. She dropped everything, and she was just calling me to see if like my son needed a ride after a practice or something. And I like broke down as I was moving the car out of the ER, and I told her what was going on. She left everything. She was like, what do you need? And I was like, I need my 3 kids up here with me. Like, I got to break the news. And so, but they, it was, that was the hardest, was to tell them, like, that we don't know if their dad's coming home, and to watch my oldest and my middle, they broke down, like, immediately. They were just like, this is not happening. But my youngest, oh my gosh, Caitlin, she is the strongest little girl I ever seen in my life. She literally, like, she's just like, nothing is happening to my daddy. It was like very, very firm in that. And it was so funny because the other 2, like, I got the tissue and I was giving it to Caitlin, I was giving it to Mackenzie and to Rylan, and Kenzie took an extra one to give to Caitlin. Caitlin pushed it away. She was like, I don't need it. I'm not crying. She was just like, and it was the funniest and the most powerful thing ever, I think, that I've ever seen, was to watch my youngest just to have that faith, and was just like, my dad is coming home. And like, there was absolutely, you couldn't tell her anything else. Like, and the other 2 were just like being hit with the reality, being hit with everything, you know, and the emotion. And she was just like, nope.
Faith of a child, right?
Yeah,
Faith of a child.
faith of a child.
So this thing that you had, Darnell, pulmonary implosion. Did I say it right?
Embolism.
Embolism. Yeah.
Uh, it could turn into a heart attack. Is that correct? Or even cause a stroke. Those things, it's not on our bucket list, right? Those things are not on our calendars to ever have those things. I mean, especially, those things that we just described that happened to Darnell. I mean, I'll even go, you said 18 blood clots?
18.
I'll bring it down to half. 9 blood clots. That happens to somebody that's older, right? Maybe somebody that's
You'd
not.
think.
You would think,
That's
right?
what they say.
Darnell, you're under 40, right?
Yes.
39 to be
39.
exact. You're right there at that almost 40. It just doesn't happen to. We're not thinking it's going to happen to people our age.
Right.
But God had other plans, right? If He brings
Thank
you to it, He'll
goodness.
bring you through it. Thank goodness for that.
Absolutely.
And that's what I try to get a hold, and I try to communicate to folks that we don't know if something could ever happen, right?
Tomorrow's not promised.
It never is Elechia. I mean, we hope it's going to be a nice sunny day. It's what the weather calls for. But, let's face it, that's one job, being a weather forecaster, I've never seen anybody get fired for. Predicting the weather wrong. It just, I've never seen a weatherman or weatherwoman get fired for predicting the weather's wrong. Not yet. But life can deal with us, different obstacles from one day to the next. And with that in mind, one of the products that I talk a lot about that I have is the living benefits that I have with Transamerica. And, it's not something that can cure cancer, that can cure a heart attack or a stroke or a lot of illnesses. But it's something that I have found that a lot of people like to have as a shock absorber. That if it did happen to somebody our age, younger, even older, if they've got something like that in place, if somebody had that could protect their family financially, do you think something like that would be beneficial to people?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Look, that was the one thing that I will say, like, looking back, we even had a conversation, like, coming home from the hospital, and I even looked over it and told him, I was just like, it wasn't fun preparing for your death, but if something was to happen, like, we were good, we were prepared, and we had things in place to help with that, and like that we would have been okay, and I think that as him being the head of our home, like that's something that he probably honestly takes peace in knowing that we have that in place, and you're right, having a policy like that it can mean, financial life or death.
What would you say to the folks out there, Elechia? The folks that are out there that, again, they're our age, right? They're our age. I just turned 49 back on Sunday. I'm 49 years young, and it was the age I've always wanted to be. Hopefully next year I'm going to see 50. But as we talked about, it's not guaranteed. But for folks our age and younger, folks in general that think that, you know what, by the way, that was a touching story. It was emotional, and it was real. That's what I like about it. For the folks out there that think that, it's a terrible thing that happened, but it'll probably happen to somebody down the street. Maybe somebody I know. The bullseye will never be on me. What would you say to those folks that could be thinking that may be putting something off like life insurance or getting a good policy that will be there for them? What would be your advice to them folks today that could be thinking that?
Well, usually if you think that it's not going to be you, then you might want to start preparing, because it usually is. Because that's the number one thing that everyone says is, I didn't think that this could happen to me. We see people day in and day out. In fact, actually, we just had a friend that passed that was, our age, that never would have thought that was to happen to them or to their family. And I think that's one of the things, is just like, you have to prepare. You have to think like that. You have to, make sure that your loved ones are going to be taken care of. And Is it financially a burden? Sometimes, yes, it is, but it's also a risk that, you're willing to take, or if you're willing to take that risk, then you are risking the consequence of not having it. So I know for me, the whole time I was by his side in the hospital, the last thing I wanted to think about was a bill. The last thing that I wanted to think about was, are we going to be able to make our mortgage or, something to that extent. I mean, let's be honest, we're both small business owners that, if we're not working, then we're not earning. So had it not been for what we had prepared, then I couldn't have fully been present for everything that was going on, whether that be the last moments of his life or a pivot point in his life, to witness the greatness of a miracle that God literally bestowed upon both of us. So
well put.
Yeah. The way I think about it is, death is certain, obviously. How death shows up is uncertain. So I would never want to take a chance that I'm not prepared for when and how it's going to show up. So we all know somebody, a friend, family member who has died early, suddenly from this unknown thing. So why we think that we'll never be that friend or that family member that could experience that is crazy to me. So it's just smart. I think if something happened to me, I definitely want my people to be taken care of. So I'm going to do everything in my power to put things in motion that will ensure that that's going to happen.
Right. Well put. So Darnell, this happened in February. We're here right here toward the end of August, creeping into September. You're here with us. So God had other plans, right, Elechia?
Yeah.
It wasn't done with Darnell.
Well, it's actually funny you say that. So the first 24 hours, they were like, this is going to be hit or miss, touch and go. The second 24 hours, like literally leading into the 48, it actually got worse. And to the point to where, like, even the nurses were blasting praise and worship music with us just to keep his spirits up and where they needed to be. And then that third day, he made a turn, and they were like, yeah, he might be here for another 2 weeks, but like we're seeing some promising numbers. And then he literally walked out of the door of the hospital on the fourth day. So yeah, we got to witness God work a miracle in him, and we seen such a outpour from our community. Like, we had churches that were shutting down literally just to do prayer nights for him. There was probably over 6,000 people that like were just praying steadily and heavily for him.
Definitely. Like I said, had it just been me having to rely on me, I don't think I ever would have made it through it. Between the hospital staff, my wife, my kids, friends and family, that's what got me through it, because I think on night 2, like she said, night 2 was probably the worst night. Because of the medicines I was taking, I couldn't take pain meds. So I was having to do exercises to bring my lungs back online. And while my pain meds were in me, I was doing a lot of the work. But when the pain meds wore off, the effects from the work I did on my lungs, it was probably the worst pain I ever experienced in my life. And like, if there was ever an easy button to where I could say I'm checking out right now, I probably would have hit it that night. And like I said, the only thing got me through is literally all of that. She probably didn't know this, but I think the first night I woke up in the middle of the night, and there she was listening to worship music. And one of the songs, it was saying that your story's not over. Your story's not over.
Amen.
And I just kept playing that in my mind. And like I said, 3 days later, I walked a little bit, and then I walked up out of there.
Elechia says something about that earlier, about on the third day.
Yeah.
And then you said something about that third day, right?
Oh, no, right.
Right. So, that's an outstanding story. It's a real story, and it's true. It hits home because of the faith you have, right? With what you have in place. And I thank you so much for coming here today and sharing your story with not only me, but with a lot of people that are out there that are viewing this podcast, because there's so many out there. And, you know, we've all been there. You know, life happens. And let's face it, life's quick. As I said earlier, I'm 49. I truly believe it seems like that there's not enough time in a day. But when I look back, you know, back in the 80s when I was a young lad, a high-spirited lad, there was still 60 minutes an hour, 24 hours in a day, and 7 days a week. Mm-hmm. Seems like when you're younger, nothing's ever fast enough. Mm-hmm. You get older, and you think, man, when's it going to slow down? So life happens. You folks have been spectacular in this presentation here. Your story, I'm just glad you were able to come here today and share it with a lot of folks out there, because they're just like us, right? They're just like your next door neighbors. Mm-hmm. They're people, and illnesses, they don't discriminate, do they?
No, they
don't. It could happen to anybody at any time. Folks, today you got to talk to Elechia Morgan and Darnell Morgan of Muscle RX and Resilient Performance, Movement and Performance. I think I got that right.
You got it.
Prominent business owners right here in the Unifour of Hickory, North Carolina, with a great story. Hey, listen, go by and check them out. You've got Facebook pages, right?
We do.
Websites.
Yep.
Learn more about Muscle RX and Resilient Movement and Performance. Great businesses. As you've heard here today, good businesses, God-fearing businesses too.
Amen
so
to
I mean, that's what gets us through that. So, Elechia, Darnell, thank you so much for being a part of this podcast. It's been my pleasure. And folks, I am Dr. J with Unifour Life and Retirement, reminding you to, if you do not have a plan in place, or even if you do, look me up, check me out. Let me show you why I do have a lot of great products that can be used as a shock absorber against illnesses such as heart attack, stroke, and cancer, and other illnesses alike. Thank you so much. I look forward to talking to you next time. God bless.